The Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome back to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM. Also getting us on youtube.com/CatholicChicago, youtube.com/CatholicChicago. Father Greg Sakowicz back again with Mark Teresi. And a new second half of the program in this beautiful week as we continue our season of Lent. What is a vocation? A vocation is essentially an occupation. In a religious context, a vocation implies someone has had a divine call to live a religious life. Through the Sacrament of Baptism, we have all one calling in our lives, and that is a call to holiness. This means following Jesus to the best of our abilities. However, holiness will look different depending on one's specific vocation. It's important to listen and recognize the signs that determine how one answers and finds a place in life. Joining us for the last 30 minutes is Vocations Director for Chicago, Father Tim Monahan of the Archdiocese of Chicago. Welcome to the program, Tim.
Thank you, Father Greg.
Welcome.
Mark, good to be here.
Good to see you.
Great to have you. Now, your own background story, Father Tim Monahan. Give us a little bit of your background.
Grew up in a small town in central Illinois, Arcola, Illinois, Diocese of Springfield. I'm the fourth of 8 kids, Irish immigrant family for 5 generations. So I loved growing up in the small town. Went to high school in Champaign-Urbana, then went to the University of Notre Dame, studied finance. So I kind of left Arcola at the age of 13. I really started living outside and going to school outside the Diocese of Springfield. I ended up joining a monastery. And
how old were you?
I was 21. So I'd finished my degree. I went to this monastery in France. I was with them for 10 years. I was some time in Texas and then mostly in France. But the monastery closed, so I was ordained in 2009 in France. But then the monastery closed, so then I asked to come to Chicago because I have 4 siblings here and a bunch of aunts and uncles and cousins. So I asked Cardinal George and my cousin, Father Larry McBrady,
a
longtime priest in Chicago. He helped me come, and then Father Jerry Bolin at the time was head of the Office of Extern Priest. So they helped me see if this was right fit. Cardinal George met with me twice, was very generous with his time. So I began the incarnation process. That was 2012 to 2017. So I spent a year at Holy Family in Inverness, and then 4 years at Mary Seat of Wisdom in Park Ridge. Had a wonderful experience, so grateful. The welcome I received here in Chicago was amazing. And then I was officially incarnated as a priest in 2017, in April of 2017.
You came we were up at the seminary when I was up there. You came and visited our office many times. The women there were thrilled, and you were just a great example of a young, enthusiastic priest who really loved his vocation.
Well, I'm very grateful because I think this is experience for many of us. Priesthood wasn't our idea. I mean, I know some of our brothers felt called very early, but even then, even if you're called early on, the sense of call, there's always an element of surprise when you're called. And so for me, my dad was a small town, he's a community banker. And so I just thought, you know what, I loved seeing his life. He was happily married, 8 kids, worked hard, just had a really good community there in Arcola. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to major in finance like he did. I'll come back and work with him. And the Lord very much surprised me. It really started awakening at the end of high school and then through college. Just a sense of maybe there's something else. Maybe my plans were good, but I had a sense that God was inviting me to really talk to Him about other plans that might have been better for me. And I'm really glad.
I like your line, Tim, that the call is not your call, it's the Lord. All through high school, I had one thought in mind. Be a radio and TV sportscaster. I love broadcasting for my father, and just saw myself as a radio and television broadcaster, play-by-play in sports. Let me do the play-by-play of the Bears, the Bulls, the Blackhawks. You name the sport, I'll do the play-by-play. The Lord had a different calling, but I find it fascinating. When you were at Notre Dame, how did you end up going to a monastery in France?
I met a priest it was through the Holy Cross priests who were there at Notre Dame.
Yes.
One of, basically a Notre Dame grad, had spent time in France for his formation and had made that connection with France. And so one of the priests came to Notre Dame to give a retreat. I met the priest there, had a really good experience on the retreat, and then just got to know the little monastery, and one thing led to another, and I just kept walking with them and ended up in France.
So if that monastery had not closed in France, would you have remained there to this day?
I would still, yes, I would probably be a monk
in
France.
monk in that monastery.
Yeah.
But there are no coincidences.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Now, say something in French so that our listeners, our French listeners.
J'ai la messe tous les samedis soirs à 18h à Sainte-Thérèse d'Avila, et vous êtes tous les invités.
Wow, which means what?
We have Mass at 6 p.m. every Saturday night in French at St. Teresa of Avila in Lincoln Park, so you're all welcome to come.
Beautiful.
No, that is true. Now, the work you do as Vocation Director in the Archdiocese of Chicago, share the ministry you do now right now, Tim.
Thank you, Father. It's a fascinating ministry. It's something that I really had to discover. The first year or two are pretty rough just because all the kind of the skill set that you have in a parish, which is so wonderful and vibrant and dynamic, doesn't automatically transfer into this new ministry of vocation work, which is, it's highly relational. It's basically, vocation ministry is, I'm walking with, here in Chicago, I'm walking specifically with young men who are finishing high school, who are in college or post-college. I'm organizing events, and I'm just helping them see, is this something that you're drawn to? Are you attracted to being a priest? Is Jesus doing something in your heart? So I help them with getting spiritual directors. I help them form them in a life of prayer. I help them connect with other discerners, other priests or seminarians, so they can get to know the local church here in Chicago. They can get to know our priests, our parishes, our discerners. And then as that grows, there's a sense of, yes, this is something that I want to try, and I do have a sense that God is calling me to at least take this next step. So that's basically my ministry, is designing these events, communicating the events, working with the guys, working with their families, and then if they want to apply, walking them through the application process. If they're accepted, then I hand them off to another priest, Father Pat Gorman, who's our director of seminarians.
Mm-hmm. And as you approach young men about their ministry, possible call to ministry, where do the Newman Centers fit in? Because that's a dynamic that's become much more a vocation kind of seedbed.
Very much so. I always tell families, I tell my brother priests, I'm just the closer. They bring me in the ninth inning because I'm not there to develop the relationship long term with these guys. So it's the teachers, the principals, the catechists, the priests, the families that are in the parishes, that are in the Newman Centers. Those are the ones that are really walking with these young men. And I do want to say, obviously a vocation is for everybody. And so we have all sorts of young women in our archdiocese who are discerning religious life.
Exactly.
There are very many dynamic religious communities. And so what I do, I will help some of these young women connect to these different communities so that they can have experience of that call. If some of the guys are older, they're thinking about diaconate, I can connect them to the diaconate office. I've talked with women who are thinking about being consecrated virgins or consecrated widows. So there's all different forms of consecration. And I try and kind of direct traffic to see where people can go, encouraging them to really listen and be open to a vocation. But the bulk of my time is spent with guys thinking about the priesthood here in Chicago.
Now, the work that you do, Tim, I'm a former vocation director, and then was called Niles College Seminary of Loyola University. It was a college seminary come out of the high school experience. I did it from 1985 to 1992, where I thought it was tough in those days, and I love being a vocation director. It is relational, walking with young men to enter the college seminary to explore the possibility of priesthood, to discern that. I think here it is in 2024, it has to be harder.
There are definitely challenges. There are definitely challenges. So like Mark, you're talking about the Newman Center. The Newman Center, they're great because these are when young women and men are opening up to a life of faith a little bit on their own. And so we have a dynamic Newman Center in Chicago. We have the Shield Center at Northwestern. We have the St. John Paul II Newman Center at University of Illinois, Chicago. And we have Calvert House at University of Chicago. So we have excellent priests and staff at each one of those places that really help develop these young people, these college students, to understand and really live their faith, which then opens them up to vocation. And that happens in Champaign-Urbana as well. It happens at Madison. Wherever I have discerners, I'll go and visit them. But I always depend upon the Newman staff to help awaken that sense of discipleship so that then they can start discerning. Now, in terms of obstacles, absolutely. There are very real obstacles. I think the biggest obstacle I see is the fact that there are so many options out there that they're being inundated with. It's like they're being bombarded by all these different ideas of their future that we didn't have the same exposure. We had a couple career paths, you had a couple ideas, and you're like, okay, maybe I'll be a sportscaster, maybe I'll be a banker, well, maybe I'll be a priest. So there were a few ideas out there, but there's a fear of commitment today, and this is being borne out in all the social science research we have. For some of our young people, they're afraid to commit because I don't think we've helped them discover the joy that comes from committing to a life path, from committing to whether it's marriage as a vocation, whether it's religious life, priesthood. There's a joy in discovering, what does my life look like as I make vows, as I structure this love so that I can give myself to another person, whether that's God, whether that's a spouse. So there's a joy in discovering that, and I don't think we've always helped our young people discover that, and so they just kind of hear the worry or the anxiety about what that could bring. So that's a big obstacle. I also, unfortunately, I encounter parents that are very resistant. Parents that they're just afraid. They're afraid that their son's going to be lonely. They're afraid their son's going to be unhappy. They're afraid that he's too young. And so my message to parents would be, please just give it a shot. Talk with your son, talk with me, talk with your parish priest. We can find a way forward. The path is long. And all we're asking for is, if God is calling your son, just let him try it for a year.
I'll give you a great story. When I was at college seminary, maybe around 1988, I was talking to a young man from then Quigley South, the high school seminary, who wanted to come to our college seminary, Niles College, to continue priesthood. And his father said to him, if you enter the college seminary, I will disown you. I will disown you. So talk about parents. And so then I gave the father a call and said, I hear that you will disown your son if he enters a college seminary. I said, why? And the father said to me, I let my kid have his choice in high school to get this priesthood out of his head, but I want him not to be a priest because I want my son to grow up to be a success. So in his mind, he said, I want my son to grow up to be a success. So he found if his son were to be a priest, he has failed in life. And you hit it right on the head, Tim. A lack of parental support in encouraging their son to move into the journey of priesthood. Because I have found in all my years, of course, call is from God, but parents are so primary in the call to religious life, to priesthood, especially mothers. And of course fathers, but especially mothers. But that story from 35 years ago, it broke my heart. Where that young man is, well, he's older today, I have no idea. But his father, I'll never forget his words.
Thank you for sharing that, Greg, because it's when I see this with mothers, as you mentioned, who these are faithful women. These are wonderful wives and mothers. They're involved in their parishes. They appreciate all that is developing in the lives of their sons. But then this fear crops up of not yet. The Lord might be calling you, but not yet, not yet. And then they keep delaying. And we think of the gospel passages of the Lord passing by. He's passing by, and if the son is being called, again, just give it a shot, because it's such a joy to be a priest. And if we as a people of God don't have faith that God is calling, or that he can call my son or somebody from my family, and that this can be a joyful life, I would challenge parents as well. Where is our faith? Will Jesus not take care of your son? Will the church not take care of your son?
I'll give you one more before Mark takes us to break. Part of the reason why there's fewer vocations is smaller number of children, fewer family members. When in the old days, family had 10 children, 6 were boys, parents would give a son to the seminary, to the priesthood. Now with 1, 2, 3 children, they want grandchildren. Take us to break, Mark.
And you both would be an exception to the Chicago institutions, Quigley, Niles, went to Monahan. But I remember Bishop Lyon saying, I don't know if you remember that story. So Bishop Lyon, 8th grade graduation, the nun announced at graduation these 8, 10 guys that are going to Quigley. And in the back of the church afterwards Tim Lyon's mom, Bishop Lyon's mom, said, "Tim, I didn't know that you were going to Quigley." He said, "Neither did I till Sister announced it." and he had a wonderful vocation. Anyway, WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. We'll be back in a few minutes with Father Tim Monahan. When we come back, maybe a message to priests. How can priests here foster vocations? And we talked about parents, but priests are wonderful models. And so we'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
Do you have an old bicycle that's not being used? Consider donating it to Catholic Charities Veterans Bike Project of Lake County. Skilled volunteers are refurbishing bicycles to make them safe and ready to be used by veterans to get to and from their new places of work. We also gratefully accept financial contributions that are used to purchase bike helmets and other safety accessories. Our veterans have faithfully served the United States, and now it is our privilege to serve them. For more information on the Veterans Bike Project of Lake County, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
We're back, WNDZ, 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. Father Greg Sagwitz, Mark Tracy with Father Tim Monahan, Director of Vocations for the Archdiocese of Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. Before the break, during the break, we were chatting it. Tim, what about local priests? I mean, they are tremendous recruiters for vocations. What is your message to them?
My message to my brother priest is be not afraid. If you love being a priest, share that with others. And that's going to look differently depending on your style of priesthood. Certain priests will say it one way, certain will say it another, but we do need to share that message with our people to say, I love being a priest. I'm grateful to God for calling me into this vocation. I've had my ups and downs. I've had my struggles, but I've had so much that has been good to my vocation. I have no regrets of being called to the priesthood, and I'm excited for what's next in this life of being a priest. So I think it's very important for our brother priests, one, just to share with our people, I do love being a priest. It's a good life. So if that's being shared, that's already a message for people to hear. And then secondly, to start inviting families, to invite especially the young people. What is God doing in your life? We believe that Jesus is alive and that he's active in our church. And so the message, again, from our priest is share the joy of your priesthood in whatever form that's going to take, but also share with our people the message of vocation that Jesus is calling today. And I ask our brother priests, if you're sharing that joy of the priesthood, if you're sharing that with our people, there also needs to be an aspect of being able to mentor some of our young guys who are in high school, junior high and high school, if they're in your parish, to be able to see this guy has he's pretty normal guy, he's got some good hobbies, he connects well with his friends. If you're seeing qualities that would make a good priest, if you see that, then you can start a dialogue with him and with his family to say, you know what, I'd love to get to know your son and talk about the possibility of priesthood, so that at that age you're bringing the family in to see, is there any resistance, is there excitement, what are the ways in which this could be explored, whether that's a trip up to Monahan Seminary. We have high school events all throughout the year called our Quigley Discerners. We do different things almost every month. So there are different ways as a high school student to already be exploring this as a possibility. And I get those names and I get connected with those guys through our parish priests. They're the ones who are inviting them and connecting them to me. And once that connection is made, I'm connecting them with other guys around the Archdiocese.
See, like you, Tim, I love being a priest. I thank God for the gift of priesthood. He's called me to. I've been a priest now almost 45 years. And if I had it over again, I'd be a priest.
Well, and there's another dimension to it. Like at the cathedral, Greg and the priest there, they respect each other. They get along. There's a fraternity. You don't have to talk about it. People see it.
Right.
And that's an attraction. But on the flip side, I'm like a lightning rod with my family, even though I'm not a priest, about church stuff. And we were at my sister's funeral. My cousin came up. They're in the parish. Young priest came in and totally has disrupted the whole place. I mean, they've been volunteers forever. They're ministers. And you also have to, young priests have to understand you're ordained to empower the laity to own their ministry. And what about that? Because you have to be honest. There are many good young priests, and there are a few that come in and take over.
There's a learning curve with any life. There's a learning. How do you learn to be married? Well, you do it.
Yeah.
How do you learn to be a priest? You do it. We try to prepare the guys, but they need time to learn. And thankfully, we have some excellent mentors amongst the priesthood. But we're mentored very much by our people.
Exactly.
We learn from our people, and so there has to be patience. I always encourage our young priests: be patient with yourself. You don't have all the answers, and that's okay. Nobody expects you to have the answers. So open your heart, be a man of prayer, be a man of service, be ready to learn. Every parish has its own culture.
Right.
So learn the culture of the parish, learn how best you can serve. And what I really appreciate was Cardinal George. I remember when I first came to Chicago, he said to me, Tim, the people need to know that you love them.
Yeah. Exactly.
If they know that you love them, then they will listen. But if they don't know that you love them, they're not going to listen to you.
Exactly.
And it takes time.
Exactly.
So that's where we have to be very patient.
And when a priest goes into a parish, you go in as a teacher, but I say you go in as a learner.
Yeah.
And also there's no question, I love my years at Monahan Seminary, but the people of God, they taught me how to be a priest. And all these years I look back, I reflect upon it, and not so much what I've given the people, but people have given me over all these years, they taught me how to be a priest. In just a few minutes we have left, Tim, in all the work you do as a Vocations Director, what brings you the most joy? On the flip side is, what is the most frustrating?
Let's start with the frustration. It's already, we mentioned it earlier, but the frustration for me is just seeing, I would say it's like witnessing the awakening in a young man's heart who's a high school student, college student, post-college. You're seeing this awakening. The Lord is doing something. And what do I mean by that? I mean, he goes on retreat, he goes on different experiences, and he says, I see this happening in my heart. So he shares with us, his fellow discerners, with me as a priest, he shares, something is happening here, and I'm excited, and I want to follow Jesus. The most frustrating part is when other people stop that. We talked about it earlier, but again, I just want to say, have the courage to give it a try. Give it 1 year. You'll know after a year what the next step is. But that's frustrating because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So for me to be able to work with these guys and bring them to the very cusp, and then...
Now, I'll share this with you before we get to the joyful part. As Vocations
don't forget
Director,
the joyful part.
I would always tell these young men, if you give it a try for 1 year, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. Because you'll never look back on your life with regrets. I should have tried the seminary for a year I did it, but it wasn't for me. You have everything to gain, nothing to lose. Give it a try. But now the joyful side, Tim.
The joyful side, I'm thrilled by seeing these young men and the courage that some of them have. Because they are saying no to things. They're saying no to the jobs they have, or college possibilities, or wonderful women that they're dating that they could marry and have a wonderful life with. So there are real sacrifices that are entailed. Now the Lord blesses that, but I'm so inspired by meeting the quality, and I encourage anybody who knows our seminarians or see young men who are discerning, people are impressed by the quality of our young men. So what is inspirational for me is being able to see this develop over time. I'll walk with them for a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, and then to see them enter. And when it is their call, you see the flourishing of their person. They love it, and you can see them kind of coming into their own, and the excitement of having found their vocation and following Jesus with confidence.
And it's not in isolation. Today at lunch, I'm meeting 8 of my classmates from Quigley, Niles. A couple of them are priests. That's a wonderful gift. 50 years later, we're still together. And what do we share? We share a faith, and a belief, and a fraternity. And that's part of what young men would gain if they consider that.
Absolutely, and I think it's very important, because a fear that parents have, a fear that young men have is, I don't want to be lonely. And I can say over and over again, it's the experience of us as priests, our bishops share the same message. It is not a life of loneliness. We have to work hard to develop friendships and relationships with our people. That is a skill set that sometimes we haven't taught our younger people, is how do you invest in people to develop relationships? But if you invest in deep friendships, you have a life that's incredibly rich and layered.
So I always say stay connected with your family, develop some good close friends that are life-giving and nourishing. And the thing is, the word you used before, the word commitment. See, we live in a society, people do not want to make a lifetime commitment. But I always say this at every wedding homily. When you are getting married, you are making a commitment not to the good times together, but more importantly to the hard times together. There'll be good times. There'll be plenty of hard times. You make a commitment not to the good times, of course you do, but more importantly to the hard times, with the grace of God to get you through it. And like marriage, like priesthood, I say let God surprise you.
Yeah.
Let God surprise you. We're not in control. We think we're in control. In the last 15, 20 seconds, Tim, if someone would be interested in talking with you, give us how can they contact you?
ChicagoPriest.com. Very easy. ChicagoPriest.com. It's our website.
Will they get a hold of you then?
Yep.
Okay.
All my contact information is there. It's Monahan, TMONAHAN @archchicago.org. My number's on there. It should be very easy to get a hold of me. We're on Instagram at Chicago Vocations. We're on Facebook. There are different ways to connect with us, but please reach out. If you're a parent, if you're a godparent, if you're a discerner, feel free to reach out.
Say goodbye in French.
Allez, bonne journée à tous. Au revoir.
And I'll say goodbye in English, so goodbye. I want to thank in a very special way a great priest in our diocese, Father Tim Monahan.
Yes.
Thank you, Father Greg. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Marvelous job. So to Tim, thank you for joining us. Special thanks to co-host Mark Treacy, our producer, engineers, Michael May, and also Clinton Cottrell. To our listeners, God bless. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You were outstanding.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.